all-knowing and all-powerful, starting with the elderly wolf uncle. Chapter 88. When Hill heard this, he narrowed his eyes slightly, and measured what Chen Tian said in his heart. I didn't know if I should say yes or not. After all, she didn't want to befriend Chen Tian now, and Chen Tian was too lazy to talk more nonsense with this woman. Let's go. He directly picked up Thor and walked towards the temporary research institute. Seeing this, Hill opened his mouth, but said nothing. She didn't dare to provoke Chen Tian. As for Hawkeye, after glancing at the other party's back, he lowered his head again and said nothing. Simple. Foster was surprised to see this scene, and he was even more curious about Chen Tian's identity, and actually 2 consecutive SHIELD agents did not dare to provoke him. Thinking about it, she also quickly followed in. Only Hill and Hawkeye were left standing in place, their faces gloomy, daring to be angry and not daring to speak. One by one, the inky deep sky was another thunderbolt slashing, and a downpour fell in an instant, soaking everything. Chen Tian and the others soon arrived in front of Mjolnir, which had been covered by people from SHIELD and covered with tents. Good man, I'm coming. Thor looked at Mjolnir in front of him, smiled, strode up and stretched out his hand. When he was banished to Earth by Odin after making a mistake, the latter sealed all his divine powers. However, he thought that as long as he retrieved his Mjolnir, then everything should be restored. Then, Thor's smile froze on his face. He, like all the people who tried to move Mjolnir before, couldn't hold it. How is it possible? 313 Thor couldn't believe the scene in front of him, and suddenly roared, holding Mjolnir with both hands at the same time, and the power in his hands became heavier and heavier. Later, even all the muscles tensed and the green tendons burst out. He gritted his teeth and his expression was hideous, as if he had used his full strength. However, Mjolnir just doesn't move and is not affected by him at all. Can't I pick it up? Thor didn't let go until he lost his strength, and took 2 steps back in succession, his eyes straightened and his expression dull, and his face was full of disbelief. A true king should not initiate a war. You have lost your qualifications to be king. He remembered the words that his father Odin exiled himself to Earth after he took people to attack the ice giants, and cursed angrily. Am I already disqualified? Thor took a deep look at Mjolnir, which he could no longer handle, and walked into the heavy rain outside the open tent, allowing the rain to wet him. Thor, seeing this, Jane quickly followed. Before leaving, Chen Tian turned his head and glanced at the location of Mjolnir, and then walked out of the tent. With a biological position, he is not afraid of being caught in the rain. A few minutes later, when everyone left the tent, the air in front of Mjolnir suddenly distorted, and a little green glow appeared out of thin air, and soon condensed into a human form. As soon as the man appeared, he grabbed Mjolnir. This person is Loki. It's a pity. I still can't pick it up. He tried to lift Mjolnir, but found that it was in vain, so he had to smile helplessly. Loki, as Thor's brother, has always been taken seriously because of the latter's excellence. So he always tries to prove himself so that Odin can look the other way. But, seeing that he couldn't hold Mjolnir, Loki didn't bother too much. After all, Thor couldn't afford it now. Just as he was about to leave, it's not good to just go into someone else's territory, Asgardian. A voice suddenly came from behind him. Aren't you leaving? Loki was slightly stunned and turned to look. But I saw the boy who had just walked out with Thor, and I don't know when he stood behind him. Ignorant Midgardian, you are actually my great evil man, the acting god king of the 9 realms. Loki raised his eyebrows, didn't seem to care too much, raised his chin and spoke proudly. You are generally called the god of mischief with us. Chen Tian showed a smile, slowly spoke, and then paused. No, you are generally called funny god. His words just fell. You're offending the gods. Loki was already enraged, his face suddenly cold, and at the same time he directly raised his hand. Airplanes. The green light gathered in an instant, exuding bursts of magical power. Directly turned into an arrow and shot towards Chen Tian. Chapter 73, The Destroyer comes. Lock in the target Chen Tian and Thor. Rain lines are connected to surfaces in a howling rainstorm. Space is tight under a white tent. The green magic energy condensed into a globe bloomed with terrifying fluctuations, like a monstrous wave, and instantly condensed into an arrow that could pierce all the power. Buzz one by one. Next second, the space seemed to be penetrated, making ripples. On the silver hammer face of Mjolnir's hammer placed on the ground, Chen Tian's figure was reflected, and a green arrow that shot towards him was also reflected. The arrows are menacing. Then Chen Tian's figure suddenly flashed, and suddenly moved half a meter to the side like a translation, bringing gusts of wind to sweep through, easily avoiding Loki's magic attack. Combat detected. Rewarded. Asgardian magic, Loki. Meanwhile, the icy voice of successfully gaining the ability sounded in his head. Another gain, plus a magical ability that belongs to Loki. Chen Tian felt the majestic magical knowledge that appeared in his mind out of thin air, and suddenly smiled. You dare to despise the gods? The guy who angers Kamui will be punished. Seeing this, Loki mistakenly thought that the other party was laughing at him, and his expression froze into anger. With a wave of both hands, green mangs gathered out of thin air, condensed into 2 flashing cold swords, inscribed with divine patterns, and slammed into Chen Tian. Aren't you a mage? Would actually stupidly choose melee combat? Seeing this, Chen Tian couldn't help but raise his eyebrows, with a smile at the corner of his mouth, only feeling that Loki's behavior was really a little funny. Presumptuous. Loki's expression became more and more gloomy when he heard this, and he drank low, and his figure flashed green like sparks in the sky. Burst. The next moment, he was actually wrapped in green divine power, flashing in front of Chen Tian, and the blade in his hand easily penetrated Chen Tian's chest. Huh, how so? However, Loki found that the other party's penetrated wound did not have blood flowing out. What surprised him even more was that he actually felt the extremely familiar energy fluctuations in the young man in front of him. Exactly his own magic. Impossible. When pigs fly. Quote. You, a Midgard, can't learn my Asgardian magic at all. Loki looked horrified, wondering how such a situation could happen. Right at this moment,